Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In various popular romantic comedies, it's not uncommon to see the protagonist pursuing and literally stalking the girl he likes. And in the end, she gives in under his insistence, realizes that no one loves her the way he does, and reciprocates his feelings. On screen, this looks cute and funny, and the guy comes off as a true romantic, willing to do anything to win the attention and love of his chosen one. However, in real life, this doesn't work at all the same way, and such behavior can not only repel a person but also force them to call the police. Celeste Manno's story began quite harmlessly. She was receiving attentions from a work colleague, which she consistently ignored. She sincerely hoped that her admirer would soon understand and just leave her alone. However, just one careless action by Celeste drastically changed the situation, turning the suitor into an obsessed pursuer, and another thoughtless act led to irreversible consequences. The young woman was genuinely fearful for her life, repeatedly sought police assistance, and confessed to friends that she sensed trouble but felt powerless and unsupported by anyone. It's likely the tragedy could have been avoided had law enforcement not operated on the principle of "come to us when the crime has been committed." Now, let's carefully examine this case and trace the chain of events that led to the tragic demise of this beautiful young woman. Who was Celeste Manno? Celeste Krista Manno was born on November 30th, 1997, in the northeastern part of Melbourne, in the Australian state of Victoria. She was the youngest of two children to parents Eggy DeMauro and Tony Manno. She grew up alongside her older brother named Alessandro. According to some information, the family patriarch left his wife when the children were still small and soon remarried, but he always maintained contact with his older offspring, supported them financially, and tried to be actively involved in their lives. During her school years, Celeste was quite sociable, active, and friendly. She engaged in sports and dance, served as the captain of the cheerleading team, and had big plans for her future. Initially, she dreamed of becoming a lawyer and enrolled in the prestigious University of Melbourne, where she studied criminal and civil law. However, towards the end of her studies, she decided law was dull, started studying advertising and marketing, and in 2018 was hired by a large and rapidly growing company that sold various goods on e-commerce platforms. Smart and talented, Celeste quickly grasped everything on the fly, successfully fulfilled her duties, and rapidly ascended the career ladder. She went from a simple call center worker to the head of an entire department in less than a couple of years, and was considered one of the most promising employees. Everyone admired her intelligence, initiative, and ability to organize work rationally and competently. Moreover, Celeste possessed outstanding external attributes and a flawless figure. During her university years, she even participated in the university beauty contest and was among the top 3 leaders. She always had a multitude of admirers, so from a young age, she was used to significant male attention but was very meticulous in choosing partners. The persistent colleague alongside Manno, a certain Louis Nader Sacco, worked at the company. He was nearly 16 years older than her and showed a lively interest in the new, beautiful hire from the very first days she appeared in the office. It's worth noting that Louis was quite reserved and unsociable, and evidently lacked any career ambitions, as he had long occupied the same minor position without any desire for development. Kind, smiling, and open, Celeste did not want to hurt Louis's feelings, so she always politely declined whenever he tried to ask her out. However, the man repeatedly tried to draw her attention in various ways. Sometimes Celeste would make jokes to lighten the mood, but she was firm in her desire to have nothing to do with him. Louis interpreted this situation as a challenge or a game. He thought that his young boss was simply playing hard to get, and decided that he would win her over no matter what. His attentions were very persistent, awkward, and simply annoying. But Celeste tried to keep her composure and hoped that he would soon give up or shift his attention to someone else. As time passed, Sacco remained relentless. He became literally obsessed with the young beauty, and everyone around noticed it. One day, Manno confided in a close friend and colleague that she would never even consider a relationship with Louis. First, he was odd and entirely unpredictable. Second, she was never attracted to men without ambitions and life goals. Third, the significant age difference also played a role. However, she felt pity for her admirer, as despite all his efforts, he stood no chance. A fatal mistake. In his fruitless attempts to win the attention and affection of his colleague, Louis completely forgot about his own work duties. He had never been a particularly diligent worker, but now he simply stopped performing his direct functions. His productivity plummeted, and the senior management was dissatisfied with the situation. Sacco received 3 reprimands and warnings, and in early autumn of 2019, the negligent worker was finally dismissed. Louis was very upset by this turn of events, and as he packed his things in the office, it seemed as though he was about to cry. Celeste, meanwhile, experienced mixed feelings. On one hand, she was relieved that the annoying suitor would finally disappear from her life and stop bothering her with his persistent overtures. On the other hand, she felt some guilt, believing that this had happened partly because of her. Manno, as a department manager, thanked the dismissed employee for his years of service, escorted him to the building exit, and on parting, tried to encourage him by patting him on the shoulder and sincerely wishing him luck. However, it soon turned out that this harmless act was a fatal mistake and a catalyst that fueled Louis's belief that they could make it work. Instantly, the man decided that Celeste was simply afraid to start an office romance as she was his boss, and it could lead to general disapproval and negatively affect her career. Now, in his view, nothing stood in the way of their happiness, and they could be together. Overwhelmed by his feelings, Louis unexpectedly kissed Celeste on the cheek. An awkward pause followed. Stunned by his audacity, Manno was at a loss for how to react, so she simply turned around and hurried back into the office building without saying a word. This reaction convinced Sacco once and for all that Celeste had feelings for him, and he should not give up. The relentless stalker. A few days after being fired, Louis created a social media account, located Celeste's profile, and sent her a friend request. Initially, she accepted it, thinking there was no harm. But when he began bombarding her with requests to meet and go out together, she tried to politely decline at first, and then simply blocked him. The next day, the former colleague sent her another friend request from a newly created profile. Celeste tried to ignore it, but he started commenting on her photos, praising her looks and figure, and noting how great a couple they would make. She then tried to adjust her profile settings so that no one except friends could send her messages, comment on her photos, or posts. A week later, during a family celebration, she complained to her relatives about the persistent pursuer, also recounting that bizarre incident on the day he was fired. Her family listened, but at that time everyone assumed it was not serious, and the unwanted admirer would soon lose interest and disappear from her life forever. Louis didn't have Celeste's personal phone number. During their work together, they only communicated through work channels. But now she began receiving strange romantic messages from an unknown number, and she immediately guessed who they were from. The admirer sent her romantic poems he had written, admired her beauty, and again tried to coax her into going out. Manno answered the stalker's call only once, attempting to have a serious conversation with him to explain that nothing could happen between them and to persuade him to stop pursuing her. However, the man did not listen and only repeated how pleasant her voice was and how glad he was that she had finally picked up the phone. After this, she tried to block the pursuer, but he called each time from a new number. Eventually, she decided to change her number, but within a week, Louis somehow found it out, and the telephone harassment continued. Seeking protection. For about half a year, Celeste unsuccessfully tried to ignore the crazed admirer. She blocked his numbers and fake social media pages, did not respond to messages, and tried to live her usual life. However, the stream of messages continued, and their nature gradually changed from romantic to bold and threatening. Now the man did not ask. He demanded to meet with her and began detailing his delusional, intimate fantasies about what he would do with her right now. But that was not even the worst of it. It turned out the stalker began following her from work to home, learning where she lived. Celeste didn't realize at first that Louis was now present in her life, not just in messages, but was literally trailing her every move. She occasionally glimpsed him near her home, but each time convinced herself it was her imagination, a product of nerves. When the young woman finally realized that she was not mistaken, and that Sacco, with his maniacal obsession, was indeed following her, she decided to seek police protection. Manno wanted the law enforcement to issue a special order prohibiting the stalker from approaching her and her home. However, the officers were indifferent to her request, if not outright mocking. According to the police, the man had done nothing illegal or reprehensible, as writing poems or expressing explicit fantasies in text messages is not forbidden and is not punishable. Celeste could not provide evidence that Louis was following her and lurking near her home, so she was simply asked to leave the precinct and not hinder the police from catching real criminals. The long-awaited restraining order. For another 6 months, Celeste continued to suffer from the relentless harassment of her former colleague. During workdays, she frequently noticed his car parked across the street from her office, and in the evenings, he would drive past her house several times. She constantly felt his gaze, which made her nervous and live in constant tension. In August 2020, Manno approached the police again, this time providing photo and video evidence on her phone that Louis was indeed following her. A different officer took her statement, who took the situation more seriously and was even surprised at his colleague's indifference. He advised her to immediately go to court, where a restraining order was issued against Sacco, and he was notified that he could no longer call or approach her or try to contact her in any other way. Clearly, the man did not expect this turn of events, and he indeed disappeared from Celeste's sight for a few weeks. She was happy. For the first time in a long time, she felt free and believed that the harasser would no longer bother her. However, her relief was premature. Less than a month later, she began receiving messages from unknown numbers, in which Louis first pleaded and then demanded she retract her statement and remove the restraining order, as he believed it interfered with their romantic relationship. After receiving several messages, Manno immediately went to the police, as her pursuer had violated the restraining order, and now he had to face the consequences. The man was fined and warned that further violations would lead to much more severe measures, and if he did not leave the young woman alone, he could end up in jail. After this, Sacco did not make his presence known for almost 2 months, and the young woman decided that he had finally left her alone. Fateful photo with a new boyfriend. In September 2020, Celeste met a young man named Chris Reedsdale. He was just a year older than her, and they quickly found they had many common interests, views on life and goals, so a romantic relationship soon developed between them. She told her new boyfriend about the harassment from her former admirer and confessed that although he had not made himself known for over a month, she still felt a sense of anxiety. Chris endeavored to surround his girlfriend with care and attention, doing everything to make her feel safe and worry-free. In early November, the young woman invited her new boyfriend to a family dinner to introduce him to her parents and brother. Celeste's choice was well received by her family. They immediately got along well, and her mother even joked that her girl was now in safe hands that would protect her. The next few weeks again passed peacefully, and the former admirer no longer appeared or tried to contact Manno. The young woman was happy, spending all her free time with Chris, and it seemed she no longer worried about Louis potentially bursting back into her life or harming her in any way. On November 15, 2020, the love-struck couple went out on a date. They sat in a cafe, enjoying each other's company, when the young woman suggested capturing the moment by taking a selfie. The photo turned out very romantic. The couple was sitting at the same table, embracing, smiling, and looking very happy. Celeste liked this frame so much that she decided to use it as her profile picture on social media. In doing so, she also wanted to share news of her new relationship and signal that things were serious. Chris also posted the photo on his page, accompanied by a touching caption about how he loves this girl and would do everything to keep her eyes sparkling with happiness, as in this picture. Unfortunately, this outing turned out to be the last for the couple. The tragic incident. On the evening of their last date, Chris dropped Celeste off at her home, and they said goodbye, planning to meet the next day. Celeste spent about an hour in the kitchen with her mother, talking about her boyfriend, before heading to bed since she had to get up early for work the next morning. On Monday, November 16, 2020, around 4 in the morning, Eggy was awakened by the sound of breaking glass, but she didn't immediately understand what was happening. Then, suspicious noises, banging, screams, and commotion followed. At first, it seemed to her that the noises were coming from the street, but she then realized they were inside the house. Eggy jumped out of bed, threw on her robe, and rushed to her daughter's room. She flung open the door and saw in the dim light someone literally jumping away from Celeste's bed before escaping through the broken window. When Eggy turned on the light, she was confronted with a horrifying scene. Her daughter was lying in a pool of her own blood, covered in cuts and small shards of broken glass. Celeste was struggling to breathe, gasping for air, her eyes wide open and staring upward. Her mother immediately called emergency services and tried to stem the deep, bleeding wounds on her daughter's body until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, it was too late to save her. By the time the police and doctors arrived, she had passed away. The medical examiners later found over 20 penetrating stab wounds on her body, with the fatal blow to her heart. Investigation and the prime suspect. Analyzing the situation and comparing the scene of the incident with Eggy's testimony, the police concluded that the assailant took less than 3 minutes to break into the victim's room through the window and carried out the attack before her mother entered. The suspect used a large butcher's knife, striking randomly, and Celeste tried to defend herself, as indicated by numerous cuts on her arms. When asked if her daughter had any enemies, Eggy could only recall one name, Louis Sacco, who had obsessively pursued the young woman for over a year, harassing her with calls and threatening messages. This information was corroborated by other family members, as well as her friends and colleagues. At the scene, the suspect left a large number of bloody fingerprints, and DNA was found on a fence he jumped over while fleeing, as he had injured his hand. It was imperative to detain and interrogate Louis immediately as the prime suspect in the case, and to verify and compare all the evidence and witness statements. Sacco was arrested the same day, but initially, he vehemently denied his involvement in the incident, insisting that he loved Celeste and would never harm her. However, soon after, forensic results confirmed that the bloody fingerprints found in the victim's room and on the fence were his. Law enforcement also pointed to the restraining order against approaching the young woman, which he had violated. Additionally, on the evening before the tragedy, it turned out that Louis had purchased a hammer and a large knife at a local hardware store, captured on surveillance camera at the checkout while paying for his purchases. He later used the hammer to break into the house through the window, and the knife to fatally attack the unfortunate woman. Calculated criminal or a man in need of treatment. The evidence against Sacco was irrefutable, further underscored by his long-term surveillance of the victim, knowing virtually everything about her. However, the final trigger for him was a photo the young woman posted on social media with her new boyfriend. After this, he went to a store, purchased a knife and a hammer, and under the cover of night, went to Celeste's home to end her life. His actions were seen as deliberate, premeditated criminal activity, yet Louis's behavior was quite erratic, raising doubts about his mental stability. Notably, the man, nearly 39 years old, had never married, continued to live with his parents, had almost no friends, and never held a job for long. People described him as nervous and introverted with severe socialization issues. Additionally, Sacco had a biological brother who was serving a lengthy sentence for a criminal act at that time. A forensic psychiatric evaluation was ordered for the accused, and his attorney insisted that his client needed not imprisonment but specialized treatment, as he required professional help. This argument outraged and infuriated the victim's family, who feared that the cruel criminal might evade punishment. Psychiatric experts, after interviewing Louis and analyzing his behavior, concluded that he did indeed suffer from some mental disorders. However, at the time of the crime, he was fully aware of his actions. Moreover, he had prepared for the crime in advance, planning the details. This meant that Sacco, despite his attempts to feign insanity, would undoubtedly have to face trial. The trial and sentencing. It was not until the autumn of 2023, 3 years after the tragic end of the young woman, that the criminal finally appeared in court. During this time, he repeatedly tried to prove that he was mentally ill and therefore could not be convicted of deliberate criminal activity. He spent most of this period in a psychiatric clinic. In the courtroom, Louis behaved calmly and detachedly, seemingly uninterested in the proceedings around him. He admitted his guilt, but insisted that he had not intended to end the girl's life, merely to win her love. However, the jury unanimously found Sacco guilty on all counts. The defendant was sentenced to 36 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no sooner than after 30 years. Celeste's Law, which was never passed. Celeste's parents repeatedly pointed out that their daughter had contacted the police as early as 2020, hoping for protection from Louis. However, her complaint was not accepted because, according to the existing legislation, only attempts to physically contact the victim were considered harassment, while online stalking and phone harassment were not criminally punishable. Throughout the 3 years of preparing for the trial, the mother of the deceased young woman, together with professional lawyers and some activist organizations, worked on developing Celeste's Law, which would have introduced criminal liability for stalking on social networks through text messages and emails. Eggy DeMauro believed that this would help protect many women and girls and prevent the tragic fate that befell her daughter. She aimed to achieve significant changes in the existing criminal legislation and directly approached the Legislative Commission of Victoria. The woman developed over 40 recommendations and amendments, but almost all of them were ultimately rejected. Investigations showed that in the vast majority of cases, online stalkers limit themselves to their invisible presence and do not seek to contact their victim in any other way. The amendments that were made only helped to limit access to confidential information on social networks, and in cases of severe stalking involving threats, a restraining order could be issued, similar to if the person were pursued in real life. However, there was still no criminal liability for such crimes. Currently, for such actions, a stalker might only receive a verbal warning, and upon repeated violations, they might be fined, though not always. Celeste's Law has yet to be enacted,